So hey everyone, welcome. I hope you are having a good day wherever you are watching this from. Thank you for joining us in worship. My name's Brett. I'm one of the pastors here, and we are in a series called Mountains and Valleys, where we're going through and taking a look at some of the Psalms, which is this prayer book in the middle of our scriptures that has this interesting collection of ways to pray, and it comes from every possible angle of the human experience, which is what I love about it. It has some of the best things in life and how do we connect with God there, and it has some of the worst things in life and how do we connect with God when that's going on. And this week, I'd like to talk about something that's important to all of us. Whether you know it or not, it's important to you. And I want to talk about what it means to be a pilgrim. Now, I know that is a super churchy word, and what usually comes to mind when we hear the word pilgrim is something like this. Now, this young man looks like he is absolutely hating his life, and that his mom has dressed him in whatever this is, and that he wants to get out of it as soon as possible, which is understandable. I wouldn't be happy if I had to wear that either. Now, I do want to talk about maybe a different reference for what a pilgrim is. If you think about NFL football, maybe some of the most legendary fans are the fans of the Green Bay Packers. These people are rabid fans, and they dress in crazy ways. They take time to prepare to head to the stadium, and they can spend sometimes whole days on this journey to Lambeau Field to participate in this thing that's going on. And here's the thing, you do not walk out your door looking normal and then get to the stadium and look like that. This is something that happens a long time before you leave. You start to get ready for the thing that you're going to experience. This takes time, it takes effort. There's a whole journey involved. And when I talk about being a pilgrim, what I mean is, specifically in a religious context, it's someone who is going through a ritual and a journey to head to the place that they want to be, something that's important. Right now, my family is going through the Marvel movies, the whole MCU, because we've been social distancing, and what else are you going to do? And we just finished movie 14. And we've developed kind of this ritual around the Marvel movies, more or less. Like they will send me out to go get the sacrificial pizza, and I will bring it home. And the kids will ascend the steps to put on the ceremonial PJs, and they will come back down the steps. Everybody gets in their correct spot, snuggles with the blanket of their choice. The dog is cast out into darkness because he wants to eat the pizza. Then we shut the door, we recap the previous film, and we talk about who was doing what and which characters were where, and then we hit play. We have this ritual, this journey that we go on in order to prepare for this thing that matters to us. Now, I don't know what you have in your life, but if you would maybe share with the people around you, or you can put it in the comments on the virtual lobby and chat room. But what are the things in your life that you take time to prepare for so that when you get to the thing, it is more meaningful? For some of you, it might be going on a fishing trip or a hunting trip. It might be hanging out with a certain group of friends and meeting up at that one restaurant. Do y'all remember when we used to go to restaurants? Wasn't that great? And I'm excited to get that part of my life back. Maybe you go to visit a certain family member or to cook a certain meal. Or maybe for you, it's working in the yard. I don't know. But I'm betting that you have some ritual in your life that prepares you for the thing that you're going to experience. And the crazy thing about being on a pilgrimage, being on a journey like that, is you start to experience the thing that you're heading towards in advance. Like when we're setting up for the Marvel movie, we kind of start to get that movie thing happening before we even hit play. Our brains kick into gear and we remember what's been going on. We share the story about what's already happened. We kind of start to experience it before we even get to the thing that we're headed towards. And there's this place in the Psalms. Ron talked about it a couple of weeks ago. It's really interesting. It's called the Psalms of Ascent. And there's these 15 Psalms from Psalm 120 to 134. And they're especially marked for this pilgrimage, this journey that was really important to the Hebrew people who wrote the Old Testament. And 3 times a year, they would journey to Jerusalem, to the temple on Mount Zion, to encounter the living God. And what I want to do is just look through some of the themes that are going on in these Psalms. We obviously can't hit all of them. There's 15 of them. But if we were to zoom out and to look at them as a whole, what are some of the things that bubble up to the surface that help these people prepare for this moment when they're going to meet God Almighty? Like, what do they do? What happens? What are the things that are going on in their lives as they're on this road that sometimes would take days, depending on where they were coming from, to head to the temple, to meet with God? How does that go? I just want to kind of dive in. I want to use Psalm 126 as sort of the center of the sermon today, but we'll be bouncing all over these 15 Psalms. And so Psalm 126 is one of the songs of ascent. It starts like this. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. So 2 things that I want to pull out of this. The first one I won't spend that much time on, but notice the plural language. We were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Usually when we go somewhere that matters to us, when we orient our lives around this thing, and if we're going to experience the presence of God in our lives, it matters who's going with us. Because when we're on a long journey, and life is a long journey, sometimes it's a tough climb, it matters who you have with you that keeps you pointed in the right direction for the long haul. I remember my senior year in college, one of my favorite bands was going on their farewell tour. And it was a ska band. So if you are not from the 1990s, there was this thing that happened called third wave ska. You don't need to look it up. It's fine. But there were a couple of things that were kind of high points. It was basically rock with a horn line and kind of some Jamaican influence. And it was this, anyway. And so our favorite band was going on their farewell tour. And it was like 3 hours away in Jacksonville. We were in Tallahassee. And all of us piled together. We started listening to the music from when we left. And we talked about our favorite moments watching this band play over the years. The whole way there, it was like we were grabbing that concert and pulling it into the present, even though we hadn't gotten there yet. And I wouldn't have gone on that journey the same way if it hadn't been for the people going with me. So when you, as someone who maybe you're considering following God, following Jesus, maybe you've been at this for a long time, who do you have with you on the journey? That makes all the difference, whether we could stay with it for the long haul or not. But I want to look at these first 3 verses. Something that comes to mind when I read this, he says, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with shouts of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. One of the things that's going on here is this journey starts with remembering. When people set out to encounter God in their life, one of the places that it starts with is remembering what he's done for us. Where were you when you met God for the first time? When you had that moment when you knew that the living God had showed up in your life? Maybe it was when someone prayed for you and something happened in your life that you didn't expect to happen. Maybe it's peace that you had in your heart for the first time, or when you finally felt forgiven of your sin. Maybe you were gathered in worship and you were in the middle of singing. Maybe you didn't even believe what you were singing yet, and then all of a sudden it was like the presence of God hit you. You might be in a season where nothing comes to mind right now. Maybe there's been things in the past, but right now you can't even remember the things that God has done for you. Well, if that's where you're at, I just want to, maybe you can start by remembering that God valued you so much that he left heaven and died for you. That's the first place that you can start with, remembering that this is what God has done for me. And that like propels us out of our little comfortable seat and puts us on a journey of movement towards the presence of God. In Psalm 124, 2-6, he says, if the Lord had not been on our side when people attacked us, they would have swallowed us alive. When their anger flared against us, the flood would have engulfed us. The torrent would have swept over us. The raging waters would have swept us away. Praise be to the Lord who has not let us be torn by their teeth. Remembering keeps us moving. Remembering keeps us moving. We need to take time and remember. And that like changes the way that we interact with the people around us and with God. Maybe you have a group of friends, I do, like this. And when we get together, this weird thing happens. We've been telling the same stories for 20 years. That time when we embarrassed each other, or that time that maybe the police officer showed up because we were doing something we maybe shouldn't have been doing. Apparently potato guns in crowded neighborhoods don't always go over well. There are these like central stories that we share when we're back with each other. That it's funny because we know where we're gonna laugh. We know who we're making fun of at the moment. We've done this 100 times. But that's this moment where, because we're remembering together, it like anchors our relationship. And it changes the whole rest of the night because we're taking time to tell the same stories again. And sometimes it's worth in your relationship with God to tell the same story again. And to say, God, I'm so grateful when you showed up in my life and this happened. I'm so grateful that you put this person in my life. God, I remember when I was feeling desperate and you pulled me out of that. Maybe you can even be grateful for some of the pain that he let happen in your life that ended up leading to good things. When we're on the journey, like the pilgrimage to experience the living God, I think one of the places that it starts with is remembering. If we go to Psalm 120, just to kind of skip around in there, this is the opening of the songs of ascent, the Psalms of Ascent. And he starts off this way. I called on the Lord in my distress, and he answered me. Save me, Lord, from lying lips and deceitful tongues. Down in verse 5, it says, woe to me that I dwell in Meshech, that I live in the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. Now, I know that you don't know where Meshech or Kedar is, and that's okay. They're actually not anywhere near each other. This is kind of symbolic, and he's saying that I don't live among the people of God. I don't live among people who do things the way God would want us to do them. He talks about that I've lived among those who hate peace. One of the things that puts us on the journey is when we're honest about where we are. When we look at the world around us and we say, I don't want my life to look like this. You know, the world can be a comfortable place, especially if we buy enough stuff on Amazon and watch enough stuff on Netflix and eat enough stuff from a drive-thru. But sometimes it's worth looking around and saying, this place that I'm living, do I want to look like everything that's around me? Broken marriages, depression, selfish ambition, anxiety. Maybe that I've let too much of that into my own heart. Too much lying, too much deceiving, trying to look the way certain people want me to look and act. Maybe I've grown cynical, because cynical is this like great way that the world avoids intimacy and stays in control. But one of the things that is repeated through the Psalms of Ascent is this thing where the person looks around and they say, I don't like the way the world is going. I want to live different. I want to be different. Maybe one of the things that you can take time to do is to look around and say, it's worth living different so that I can experience something that's different. You know, people on pilgrimage, they don't look the same as everybody else around them. Like those Packer fans, if they walked into a gas station on the way to the stadium, everybody in the gas station knows where they're going. It's obvious. And people who are chasing after the presence of God, they don't look like the world around them. They don't talk the same. They don't act the same. They don't spend their money the same way. They don't spend their time the same way because they're going somewhere. Because the world around them isn't enough. They want something more. One of the themes that comes up again and again and again after this, like, God, I remember what you've done for me. And God, I don't want to be like the world around me. I want to move towards you. Is this probably the most prevalent theme in these 15 Psalms? Let's just take a look at the first verse of Psalm 126. Again, he says, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Or like in 122, he says, I rejoiced when they said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together, that is where the tribes go up. We'll come back to that word in a minute. The tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. The theme that is repeated the most through these 15 Psalms is about the mountain of Zion itself, or the city of Jerusalem that was built around Zion. And the whole thing is that that's where the temple is. It's this place where heaven and earth overlapped and interlocked. And for them, it was like there's the whole world, and at the very center of the world is the temple, is Zion. And the fancy term for this is called an axis mundi. It's like the whole world revolves around this place. Mundi means earth, and axis where it turns. Or some scholars have called how they refer to it the navel of the world. Like it's like the center where everything sort of sprouted from, not in a literal way, but Zion is where all the action is. That is where God's presence has come. And you'll notice whenever people are moving towards Jerusalem or Zion, it says that they are moving up. And whenever they're moving away from Jerusalem or Zion, they are moving down. That's weird language, because Mount Zion is not even the tallest mountain in its mountain range. In fact, it is like 400 feet below average height for its own mountain range. They knew that it wasn't super tall, but because this is where the action is, if you're moving towards it, you are moving up in the world. Whether you're going north, south, east, or west, if you're moving away from Zion, you're descending, you're heading down. Now, I find that interesting because for us, the place where heaven and earth overlap and interlock is the person of Jesus. right? I mean, that is where we are headed, who we are headed to. Now, often in our relationship with Jesus, we talk about proximity, which is not a bad conversation. How close are you to God? How close are you to Jesus? And we can have this conversation about how far away or how close someone might be. And that's a good conversation to have. But in the language of the Psalms of Ascent, what matters more than proximity is orientation. So let's say that this person who's quite close to Jesus, maybe they've been following God for a long time, but at this moment they are kind of facing away from where Jesus is. In some sense, they do not have the same relationship with the Lord that this person who's very far away but is facing in and moving towards Jesus has. And often I find that some folks, what happens is they get like close enough to Jesus and they stop moving towards or away and they kind of just start orbiting. Because if they got any closer to Jesus, they would like have to change their life. They would have to change the things that they watch and laugh at. They would have to change the way that they invest their finances. Maybe their generosity towards the poor would have to go up. Maybe it would impact their career or who they date or their sex life or something. And it's like, that's close enough. So we're going to keep spending energy in my relationship with Jesus, but not getting closer. We're just going to keep moving around and around and around. See, proximity, how close am I to God? That's a good conversation, but presence is all about orientation. It's all about movement. It's all about eye contact. Like I can stand next to someone in the elevator. Remember when we used to do things like that? And we have no connection. But I can look someone in the eyes who's across the street, and it be like too much of an intimate moment that one of us has to break eye contact, even if I don't know them. And in our relationship with God, I guess one question that I would ask is not how close or far away are you, but right now, is your life oriented towards Jesus? Are you moving towards him? Are you looking at him? Or are you looking away? Or are you just kind of orbiting? Because in the language of the Psalms of Ascent, it's all about movement towards the presence of God. Now that kind of leads into my next little bit in Psalm 130. The thing that I want to look at is interesting because in verse 5 and 6, this comes up several times in the Psalms of Ascent. It says this, I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits. In his word, I put my hope. I wait for the Lord more than the watchmen wait for the morning, more than the watchmen wait for the morning. Did you pick up on the theme there? There's this theme of waiting. Because when we are far away and we are moving towards Jesus, I mean, these people with the Psalms of Ascent, they would journey for days. And here's the thing, we will be with Jesus in his presence fully one day. But for most of the time right now, we are in process and we are waiting. Now, waiting is amazing because first of all, we're terrible at it. We can't sit in a waiting room long enough before we have to pull out our phones and check the news or that dumb little game that we downloaded a couple of days ago. I mean, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at waiting. But one of the things that keeps us moving towards the heart of God is being willing to not be satisfied right now. That I do not need to be satisfied right now. Freedom from satisfaction marks people who are on a pilgrimage. They're willing to forego what they want right now because they know they are headed somewhere that they really want to be. And here's the thing, when I am on my way in to experience the presence of God, I know that I will not get satisfaction until I see Jesus face to face. So until then, satisfaction is something I don't even have to expect. Now, the freedom that comes with that is massive, because guess what? That means that my relationship with my wife does not have to be the thing that ultimately satisfies me. She does not have to be God for me. My job does not have to satisfy me. I can delay satisfaction. I can have freedom from even wanting to be satisfied, hoping to be satisfied right now. And my job will not satisfy me. And I know that going in, and it's okay because I am headed in. And until I get here, satisfaction isn't even something we have to expect. And people that don't need to be satisfied now, oh my gosh, they're free. They're free from consumerism. They're free from chasing their wants, and they're free from wanting to get involved in like relationship drama. They're free from getting sucked into a bunch of like political conversations that don't even really matter, because they are on their way to meet with the living God. And I just want to say that maybe we can bring some waiting into our life and say, I can wait to be satisfied because I believe that I'm going to meet with Jesus. And until then, I'm going to keep lining my whole life up. And if I have to deny myself something now or say, I know that I want to be satisfied, but we're just not going to get it now, that's okay. We're okay with that. Going back to Psalm 126, kind of to wrap up, just maybe the last thing that I want to look at right now is in verse 4, it says, restore our fortunes, Lord, like streams in the Negev. Those who sow in tears, that I am waiting, I am traveling, I am journeying. This is hard. Life is an uphill climb. Those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, they will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. See, it's not just that we're okay with waiting now, but we have expectation that there's going to be joy in the future. And just like the people that are tailgating on their way in to a football game, or maybe my friends and I on the way to a concert, it's like we start grabbing that joy that's going to happen in the future, and it starts getting pulled into now. Like the stories that we tell and the music that we listen to and the ways that we interact with each other, it grabs that future event and pulls it into now. And if we can do that with football and music, that happens with the presence of God in our life. That the people that are oriented in that direction, that are moving towards the presence of God, they start pulling that presence into their life now and changing everyone that they meet on the way. And here's the thing, we need some people that are interested in being in the presence of God. And everything else is secondary. Everything else can wait. Everything else can be directed and oriented around that desire. I want to be in the presence of God. And everything else is going to move. And what happens when that person lives like that is that the very presence of the holy love of God starts to invade their whole life, starts to change the way that they live and talk and how they interact with everyone around them. In the book of Hebrews, one of my favorite chapters in the whole Bible, it talks about people that live like this. I just want to read a few of these verses to kind of wrap us up today. It says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. He was on pilgrimage to be with God, and so living in a tent was fine. And his kids, who were heirs of the promise, lived in tents because they were on their way somewhere. Verse 13 says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They were okay with waiting. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth, because people who are moving towards the presence of God, they don't fit in this world. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they left, they would have had opportunity to return. Are you interested in living the way the world lives? Have at it. It's all around you. It's easy. But people of faith live differently. It said instead they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. God has prepared a city for you where you get to be in his presence forever. Which direction are you headed now? And are you willing to put everything else aside to be in his presence one day? And in doing that, we pull the very presence of God into our journey along the way. Let's pray together. Lord Jesus, I want to live like that. It's easy to talk. It is hard to live like that. I don't live like that most of the day. But Jesus, make us people who are hungry for your presence. And God, come and live in us so that the world now will be different because of it. Amen. So we want to send you into your week, and we love you, and we'll see you soon.